あ、そうです。はい。はい。はい。はい。はい。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldun Azari. I'm former president, and I have the honor to moderate this press conference today. As you all know, our guest speaker is Mr. Shikata Noriyuki. He is the Cabinet Secretary for Public Affairs, and that's his official title. He has an official title, which is a friend of almost all journalists here, especially those who don't speak Japanese. And he is very helpful even when he's overseas or on the planes, or anytime you can reach him, and he will help you to provide your story. So before we start, thank you very much, Shikata-san, for your help all the time. And today he will give us some briefing about the Kishida, Prime Minister Kishida administration's foreign policy that is facing rising global tensions. We have, of course, all the issues around Japan, China, missiles, and North Korea's nuclear file, and Taiwan issues, and COVID, and also the Ukrainian-Russian war. And there are more challenges coming up. Prime Minister Kishida is going to the Middle East also soon to give Japan's policy push for Africa through TICAD, and he will go to the Gulf, to Saudi Arabia, to UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. Obviously, he will discuss energy issues. So Shikata-san will tell us more about all of this, and he will speak for about half an hour. This will be followed by Q&A until around 12 o'clock. So we have also some people watching us online. We can receive questions online. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shikata-san. Please, Shikata, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Azari-san, for a very kind introduction. And it's my great pleasure to come back to FCCJ after nearly 10 years. I was working as a Deputy Cabinet Secretary for Public Affairs, Head of Global Communications until 10 years ago. And of course, over 10 years ago, to be precise, 11 years and half a year ago, there was 3/11, and Tohoku, quake, and Fukushima nuclear power plants disasters, accidents caused lots of challenges for the Japanese society, and I was working very closely with international media based in Japan around that time. So it's great to be back and to be moderated by Azari-san, good old friend. And just to make it clear, this reported Prime Minister Kishida's trip to the Middle East is not something I can confirm at this point of time. There would be some kind of announcements later on, but Prime Minister is at least planning to attend TICAD 8 in Tunisia, and I will discuss this issue in my presentation today. So I was asked to discuss Prime Minister Kishida's foreign policy, and I will be focusing on his diplomatic agenda items in today's presentation, but also wish to touch upon some of his priority policy issues, including his economic policy under the theme of a new form of capitalism. And so I'll be touching upon these issues today as well. But first, let me just discuss so-called his realism diplomacy for a new era. And this is the title that the theme that he came up with, which includes these three pillars. Number one, attaching much importance to universal value. When we talk about universal value, we are talking about democracy, human rights, the rule of law. And this is very deeply connected with the issue of supporting for Ukraine and implementing sanctions, Japan's sanctions against Russia after late February. And free and open Indo-Pacific. Of course, this FOIP is something that late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo has been promoting, and Prime Minister Kishida as Foreign Minister has been promoting. And we wish to expand our ties with other like-minded countries to realize free and open in the Pacific. And as you know, Japan has been proposing United Nations reform, including the reform of UN Security Council. The second pillar is the global issues, which includes the concepts, idea of pursuing the world without nuclear weapons. And Prime Minister Kishida, as an MP, coming from Hiroshima, he is really attaching so much importance to this issue, and that's why he decided to go to the UN, the NPT review conference at the beginning of this month. Climate change, naturally, is the issue that we need to tackle together, and the international development issues, which would be taken up in the context of TICAD, Tokyo International Conference for African Development, the 8th round, would be another global issues which we wish to tackle. The third pillar is national defense. PM Kishida has already mentioned, that he intends to strengthen, Japan's defense capability under the current tough, the international security environment, especially surrounding Japan and East Asia. And we wish to strengthen our defense cooperation with other like-minded countries. And toward the end of this year, he will be revising existing national security strategy. Next, on briefly on supporting for Ukraine. Of course, PM Kishida has made clear Japan's stance that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is against international law, violation of international law, including international humanitarian law, or as related to international criminal law, as related to war crimes. So we are supporting international criminal courts in terms of investigation of possible war crimes. And from this perspective, Russia must be held accountable, for war crimes. At the same time, we wish to support our friends in Ukraine and Ukrainian people. So Japan's response consists of strong sanctions against Russia, both in terms of economic trade sanctions and supporting Ukraine in terms of humanitarian assistance, financial assistance, and accepting more evacuees from Ukraine. and also supporting neighboring countries of Ukraine, especially in Central and Eastern European countries. FOIP is something, as I mentioned, Prime Minister Abe proposed, and this slide is originating from actually TICAD meeting, as I recall, in 2016, when then Prime Minister Abe attended a TICAD meeting held in Kenya. And so original idea of FOIP goes as far as to Africa or the Middle Eastern countries. Because of the term Indo-Pacific, many people think that this is initiative focused on India, but we are talking about Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So as this map illustrates, of course, India is a very important partner, and this is something we are promoting practical cooperation under the Quad summit, which we held, Prime Minister Kishida hosted in May. But this FOIP could go as far as to Africa or South Pacific, island nations. And we are advocating the international cooperation to ensure rule-based international order. We wish to make FOIP process transparent and supporting good governance of some of developing countries in the region, including respecting the ownership of African countries, which we'll be discussing in the context of TICAD. And in terms of ASEAN region, Japan has been supporting connectivity in the ASEAN region with the promotion of quality infrastructure. So this applies to the Middle Eastern or African region as well. Non-proliferation or the world without nuclear weapons, this is something Prime Minister Kishida came up with his vision when he was attending the 10th NPT review conference in the beginning of this month, and he gave a speech in English, which you could watch at the Prime Minister's office website. And at this juncture, he proposed a Hiroshima action plan, and he will be tackling, this realization of this Hiroshima action plan as a host of G7 summit in Hiroshima next year in May. And Hiroshima action plan consists of 5 pillars, including importance of continuing the record of non-use of nuclear weapons. So he's advocating that Nagasaki should be the last place in the world where nuclear weapons have ever been used. Enhancing transparency is very important to establish the confidence building. He mentioned that Japan will host the leaders level CTBT Friends meeting in September or next month, and most likely as in the context of UN General Assembly Leaders Week meeting. Securing nuclear non-proliferation issue is very important. And the last point is he is encouraging visits to Hiroshima and Nagasaki by international leaders and also younger generations. And from this perspective, Japan will make the contributions to establish a youth leader fund for a world without nuclear weapons. he is going to tackle this issue of strengthening Japan's security policy in light of the challenging the security landscape surrounding Japan and beyond. And so reviewing a new national security strategy is something he is planning to realize before the end of the year, along with the National Defense Program guidelines and midterm defense program. And this will have the defense spending, the budgetary implications. Of course, Japan-US alliance is a cornerstone of Japan's security policy, and Japan is opposing any unilateral attempts to change the status quo in the East and South China Sea, as well as any form of economic coercion. So for this purpose, we are promoting collaboration not only with the United States, but other like-minded countries like Australia, or some of the European countries like UK or France, or ASEAN countries such as the Philippines. So in terms of security environment, this is the slides from our Ministry of Defense, Defense of Japan, and this slide could give you a rough understanding of tough, military or security environment surrounding Japan. Russia's military capabilities are listed closer to Europe, but it doesn't mean that Russian military capabilities are only focused on the European front, as you are aware. And more closely to Japan's neighborhoods, we are facing North Korean missile threats and nuclear program with a possibility of another round of North Korea testing nuclear weapons. China's capabilities have been going up year after year, and we are also attentive to Russian activities, not only in Europe but also in the vicinity of Japan. And there are occasions where China and Russia are conducting, for example, military exercise in close collaboration. So now let me move on to economic policy issues, a new form of capitalism. The background behind the PM Kishida's proposal is to address some of disparities in our society, income disparities, or disparities between the center and the countryside, as well as the kind of market failure, such as climate change issues, could be regarded as externality issues in the economic theory. So what PM Kishida has been promoting is he wishes to tackle these social issues, income disparity or climate change related issues, through closer partnership between government and the private sector. And this is essential. Companies' operations have much close impacts on the environment, for example, or if companies could address the salary issues, income disparity issues, that would be conducive to achieving the goal of a new form of capitalism. And our view is that there are many democracies with capitalist system face similar challenges. So this is not only Japanese issues, but also this is something we could collaborate. And so from this perspective, when we look at, say, President Biden's Build Back Better or EU's discussion of next generation EU, from our viewpoint, there are lots of commonalities. And unless we upgrade our capitalism under democracy, we could be facing more challenges in our societies, more divisions in our democracies, which would be facing challenges coming from autocracies or authoritarian states. So these are the 4 pillars of PM Kishida's new form of capitalism. The number 1 issue is investing in people, and he is of the view that we need to invest in our human resources to realize, more, for example, startup or the new startup ecosystem, and investing in green and digital transformation requires those workforces who are familiar with those new emerging technologies. So he has a clear focus on these issues, and so he is tackling, implementing some of the government's initiatives, including preparing a digital infrastructure in the countryside or training our workforces so that, for example, regional municipalities would be better at addressing digital transformation when there are challenges, such as decreasing population or hollowing out of regional industries. So this is his plan. For example, during the next 4 years or so, he intends to secure 2.3 million digital experts across Japan. And what are the kind of examples for these initiatives? He has proposed this idea of digital garden city nation. Garden city idea emerged, as I understand, in late 19th century in London. And so in the context of facing challenges such as pollution, industrialization, there was a new idea of garden city. And that idea actually arrived in Japan around 1910. And for those of you who are fluent in Japanese, garden city is translated into Japanese as dengen toshi. And when you live in Tokyo, you find some dengen toshi line or dengen chofu, or you find similar projects from Taisho era in Kansai, such as Hankyu, I guess Takarazuka or Ashiya and those suburban neighborhoods. So in today's context, this is, by combining with digital technologies, how could we revitalize our local, the regions? And this could be done in collaboration with other countries. for example, smart city projects. Japan has been promoting such projects in many mega cities in Southeast Asia and India. So this could be, some of post-COVID international cooperation for a more sustainable cities. And we are delighted, to promote international cooperation, including digital education. And we are seeing a declining population in Tokyo these days, and the younger generation of Japanese are starting to relocate to the countryside and engaging in vacation, for example. And some companies' headquarters are moving out from Tokyo to the countryside in Japan. So that could lead to more sustainable cities or the nation. Another agenda item is economic security. So Prime Minister Kishida appointed the minister in charge of economic security, first Minister Kobayashi, and now the Minister Takaichi. And this is something PM Kishida is attaching much importance to in the context of the global changes, such as the prolonged friction between the United States and China, or more recently, Russian invasion of Ukraine, or COVID-19 exposed, some of weaknesses in terms of the cross-border supply chains. So this is something that during the last parliamentary session, Economic Security Act has been passed, and the government is in the process of implementing those measures, and there could be more related measures to be implemented, during coming months and years to come. Prime Minister Kishida's foreign minister was negotiating some of mega FTAs, and especially as foreign minister, he was leading negotiation on Japan EU EPA, and of course during his term as foreign minister, he was pushing for TPP and others. So Japan is very deeply committed to promoting the kind of mega FTAs, in addition to promoting WTO reforms. And now, with the launch of IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, in May, Japan is also being active in engaging with the negotiation and realization of IPEF. And the pillars of IPEF includes the trade-related rules, supply chains, clean energy, decarbonization, and tax and anti-corruption issues. And this is something we are working with. Some of them are TPP members, and there are non-TPP members coming on board with IPEF, such as Indonesia, Philippines, or Fiji, Thailand. So this would be inclusive in our efforts to promote high standard rules and sustainable rule-making process. So TCAD is something PM Kishida will be co-hosting in Tunisia, and this is something, as Prime Minister, he is visiting Africa for the first time, and he will be meeting with a number of African leaders on the margins of TICAD 8. Japan wishes to promote, support sustainable development of African countries, good governance, and addressing human security issues. Human security issues include like universal health coverage, and in today's context, supporting distribution of vaccines under COVID for African countries. We are seeing more startups in African countries. So the relation between Japan and Africa is becoming more business partners, and more Japanese companies are interested in investing in Africa. And of course, as a continent, Africa is emerging as one of the most populous region, along with China, India, and Africa. So there's a huge business and economic potential, but at the same time, we need to ensure that African countries will develop with a quality growth. And we see some development finance which could be distortive. So we need to ensure that there will be sustainable development finance. And also, many African countries are facing food security or energy security challenges after Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we need to support African countries' challenges from this perspective. And of course, African countries, some African countries are facing the challenges of democratic governance, the rule of law, or conflict-related issues. So that's where we wish to support Africa, and this involves investing in people along the line that I mentioned in the context of new form of capitalism. Very briefly, let me mention state funeral for late Prime Minister Abe to be held in September 27th. We have been informing through diplomatic channels to various countries and international organizations. So we expect a number of international leaders and other official delegations would attend state funeral for Mr. Abe. And we are already struck by outpouring of condolences from different parts of the world, including many the parliaments or Congress coming up with resolutions to pay tribute to late Mr. Abe. And this is PM Kishida's overseas visit so far. As you can see, after March, he has been very active in engaging with both Asian leaders and European leaders and US presidents. And when he has been visiting Asian countries, he has been making the case, explaining Japan's view on Russian invasion of Ukraine, as I explained. And there are different viewpoints in Asia, but PM Kishida has been extremely active in engaging with Asian leaders on this issue as well. So very lastly, these are the appendix for more detailed the explanation about Japan's measures regarding assistance to the people of Ukraine and the sanctions against Russia. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shikata-san, for your insights. Before we open the session, please let me ask for a copy of your PowerPoint, because it's very comprehensive and neat, and it helps us journalists to organize our reporting. So we hope we can get a copy online later on. The first question, please, Fee, and then.
Thank you for that presentation. My name's Will Fee. I'm a news reporter at the Japan Times. You spoke of this idea of realism diplomacy for a new era, but I don't think you mentioned South Korea, a country that obviously Japan shares a very complex history with. It's possible that today the South Korean Supreme Court could rule to seize the assets of a Japanese firm related to compensation for forced labor during the colonial period. What's the government's stance on the issue? And in the case of asset seizure, how does the government intend to respond? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question. Of course, for addressing regional security issues or stability, including our response to North Korea, we think that Japan-South Korea cooperation, bilateral cooperation, and Japan-South Korea U.S. trilateral cooperation are essential. So we are working very closely together on those security issues, especially as related to security challenges coming from North Korea. At the same time, as you mentioned, there exists very extremely difficult challenges between the two countries as related to the wartime, the workers, and as Foreign Minister, Prime Minister Kishida worked on reaching bilateral agreements with South Korea on comfort women issue. And so from our viewpoint, it is essential that we keep promises between the two countries, which is fundamental to our bilateral relationship. So Japan is willing to communicate closely with the Korean side based on Japan's consistent position, as we have made clarified, and hopefully, we would rebuild, Japan-Korea relations to a more robust bilateral relationship. Thank you.
おはようございます。インドネシアの新聞記者、テレビニュースのスシローと申します。
Sorry, Richard, we don't
Of
have
course,
that translation.
Yes,
Please.
Mr. Shikata, as far as you are as a person from the Cabinet Secretary for Public Affairs, I would like to ask you about your job. So a very simple question. How far is the disclosure policy of daily information regarding the daily activities of the Prime Minister Kishida, including his private meeting with foreign guests? You know why? Because last week, our governor, Jakarta governor, met with Kishida, Prime Minister Kishida, and also Foreign Minister Hayashi. I got the information from Foreign Minister Hayashi, but I could not have the information from the meeting with Prime Minister Kishida. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. As Cabinet Secretary for Public Affairs, I cover both domestic and international media, and I also engage in kind of public diplomacy, especially in the context of Prime Minister's visits to foreign countries. We try to be kind of proactive in terms of releasing information, and especially in the context of Prime Minister Kishida's diplomatic activities, we closely collaborate with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and our, Prime Minister's office website tries to cover major diplomatic activities of Prime Minister. So, for example, when I accompanied Prime Minister Kishida to Indonesia, Jakarta, naturally our Prime Minister's office website covers the bilateral meeting, summit meeting between Prime Minister Kishida and President Joko. And of course, since Indonesia is going to host G20 summit in Bali, the Prime Minister Kishida is very much looking forward to collaborating with the presidency of G20, President Joko. Of course, President Joko came to Japan, and so we have been in very close touch with each other. On this particular meeting, I guess this is something which, you know, there's a kind of limit as to how much information, you know, we may be releasing based on various activities of Prime Minister. We are focusing on major diplomatic or domestic activities of Prime Minister, and there is a kind of issue of selection of those engagement of the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Rocky Swift with Reuters. A major issue facing Japan and other major economic allies is a shortage of chips, microchips, for cars and other industries. There's been talk lately about this Chip 4 alliance between the US, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Do you have any details on this alliance, such as the membership and any plans for initial meetings and where and when those meetings might be held? Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Actually, I don't have much to add, you know, in terms of possible kind of direction or cooperation, you know, for this Chip 4 alliance. But as I mentioned, in the context of economic security, semiconductor issue is something which the Japanese government is focused on, and this, you know, semiconductor itself is a very strategically important industry. Of course, you know, Japanese companies used to have larger shares in the global markets in the semiconductor industry, and there is the angle of reviving Japanese semiconductor industry. As you're aware, in Kyushu, there is new investment, you know, coming from TSMC, and the Japanese government is financially supporting that investment. Between the United States and Japan, we have been discussing, you know, those what kind of cooperation we could promote between the two countries, which naturally involve private companies too. So in cutting edge, you know, science area, we are promoting various cooperation, especially between Japan and the United States, in areas like AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, and semiconductor. So there are wide-ranging issues. And as we kind of engage with our, the business partners in due course, there may be a, better collaboration among the countries that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few questions online. Please let me ask one of them as they came in order, and then we will go back to the floor. This question is from Koichi Sasazawa from the Yomiuri Shimbun. He wrote a long explanation about the dispute between Japan and China in the economic zone. He says, despite repeated warning from Japan, China never stopped illegal maritime scientific research in Japan's EEZ without consent, which UNCLOS stipulated. Reportedly, China is globally probably interested in rare metal earth in the surface of the mud layer in the ocean floor there. On the other hand, China doesn't hope UN to designate continental shelf extension regarding the southern Kyushu plate, Palau Ridge, due to concentration of with China's second archipelago and line strategy. He explains a lot about this area geography. China may be trying to find an evidence that proves the ridge area is not continental shelf extension. So the question is, how is Japanese government analyzing and assessing China's intention for such illegal activities? And also, don't you think Japan's strong protest through diplomatic channels cannot already prevent these repeated compliance violations by China? Do you have alternative on this regard? Thank you.
Of course, earlier this month, there was an incident of the launch of ballistic missiles by China into waters near Japan, including Japan's exclusive economic zone. And from our viewpoint, this is a serious problem concerning the security of Japan and the safety of the Japanese people. So based on this, we strongly condemned and protested these Chinese actions and called for the immediate suspension of military drills, as China's recent activities have a serious impact on the peace and stability of the region and the international community. Of course, Sasazawa-san's question is more focused on, as I understand, delimitation of the delimitation of the ocean between Japan and China. And as I recall, we agreed in 2008, I believe, to negotiate this issue. And there is a difference of views between China and Japan on this issue. Our view is that the median line is the basis for the possible delimitation. But as I mentioned, China takes different viewpoints, and we have conducted some consultations in the past, which have not led to the agreement yet. And our consistent position is that we should continue to negotiate based on the international law, and while we are negotiating, there should not be any attempts, to unilaterally changing the status quo, including kind of dispatching the search vessels or any attempts, to develop underground resources, energy resources, and possibly some other, rare earth or metals, as was mentioned. Thank you.
He asked, do you have any other means other than diplomatic means? Like, would Japan send some military ships to prevent China from doing this, since that you consider it your own zone?
Well, as I mentioned, we, between the two governments, we agreed, to negotiate, consult with each other, and as I mentioned, Japan is committed to continue to negotiate with the Chinese side, and this is something which is essential to reach constructive and stable relation between the two countries. And we are of the view that the multi-layered the communication between the two countries, two governments, is very important. So, as many of you know, earlier this week, our national security advisor, Mr. Akiba, visited Tianjin and had a dialogue with Mr. Yanjechi for like 7 hours. So this is part of a resumption of regular dialogues that we have been conducting between the two governments. And due to COVID, we have not been holding these bilateral dialogue, and we are resuming. So, and of course, we have from the Japanese side, we have raised a number of issues, including as related to Taiwan or Ukraine or North Korea.
Thank you. Another question in line from Pio D'Emilia. He's Sky 24. He asked exactly, as for Europe, Japan's interests, especially economic ones, don't necessarily coincide with those of the United States. Don't you think Japan should try to develop its own foreign policy, especially toward China, instead of blindly following the US, according to Pio D'Emilia? What's the question? Thank you.
I think my basic view is very different from the view that was expressed by him. And of course, in terms of Japan's foreign and security policy, US-Japan alliance is extremely important. But as I just mentioned, we are bilaterally engaging, for example, with China. And also, we have been collaborating very closely with EU members and UK, of course, in the context of G7 summit process, and when Prime Minister Kishida attended NATO summit for the first time as Japanese Prime Minister, he is engaging with NATO members more closely. And my view is that neither, no G7 leaders are engaging with other Asian leaders as intensive as Prime Minister Kishida, especially since March. And as I mentioned, Japan has been taking very straightforward positions in the context of sanctions against Russia and supporting Ukraine. So this is a very firm view, and we have our own messages that we are conveying to our European friends and American friends as well. Thank you.
Kageyama with Associated Press. I want to ask you about the Unification Church, which has risen in the news like unexpectedly because of Mr. Abe's assassination. And Mr. Kishida has reshuffled the cabinet to reduce the number of people allegedly associated with the Unification Church, but it turns out there's more or just the same. So first of all, what is your ties, if any, to the Unification Church? And please tell us about that. And given that we're finding out that the Unification Church, the relationship that Mr. Abe and others played within Unification Church was such a key part of Japan's foreign policy. What do you think about that? You know, if you could give us your views as a foreign policy expert.
Well, thank you very much for your question. With regard to issues as related to the so-called, former Unification Church, Japanese or Prime Minister Kishida's view is that we need to be extremely careful not to arouse suspicion among the Japanese public regarding relationship with an organization that has been pointed out, to cause various problems in society. So, in the context of cabinet reshuffle, PM Kishida also instructed that each cabinet member should examine their relationship with the organization concerned in his or her responsibility as a member of parliament, and strictly review the relationship based on the results of such inspection. So as you mentioned, several cabinet ministers have revealed, they had relationship with the organization in the past, but have all mentioned, that they will review their relationships, going forward. And in addition, PM Kishida instructed the Minister of Justice and other relevant cabinet members to make every possible effort to cooperate in providing, say, counseling on malicious business practices, such as so-called like spiritual, sales, which is like incidents where people are talked into buying very expensive jars and other items, and this could involve coercion. So, some of those activities could prove to be illegal activities, and as you heard, Minister of Justice convened first this kind of meeting along with other senior officials from other ministries, including National Police Agency or Consumer Affairs Agency, to address these issues. So the government is aware of these potential problems and trying to address these issues to prevent illegal activities or malicious business practices, or try to support those victims. Thank you.
Also, last question online from Karine Nishimura. She is Radio France and Libération newspaper, French. She asked, Liberal Democratic Party tends since decades to invest in concrete rather than humans. Why do you think it will change with Prime Minister Kishida? As you know, Japan was first in digital transformation in late 90s and early 2000s, but is now late compared with many other countries. Did you really analyze the reason why Japan is no more innovative and stops to lead the technologies in the world? Thank you.
I kind of agree to the views expressed to some extent, but not entirely. The PM Kishida recognizes the challenges that the Japanese society or Japanese economy have been facing. So that's why he is proposing this concept of new form of capitalism. and as I explained in my initial presentation, PM Kishida is not talking about concrete or the concrete projects in terms of infrastructure. He's more talking about in terms of government role as related to digital. Government will be responsible, for securing digital infrastructure, but more focused on investing in people. So there are emerging reforms of our education system, especially as related to higher education, to realize more startups. And we are of the view, that although, there have been shortages or deficiencies in terms of track record, we would be realizing, more competitive industries in close collaboration with the government and the business sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Shikata-san agreed kindly to extend the session a few more minutes. So, Tom, we have a question.
Thomas Sullivan, Shikata-san, associate member. Good to see you again. My question is about TCAD 8 and the Ukraine crisis. It looks like the Prime Minister is going on to a continent next week where there is a considerable amount of support for the Russian position. And the Russian defense minister mentioned 2 days ago that the military leaders of 9 African countries were in Moscow with him to discuss, security issues. And Macky Sall, the president of Senegal, recently met with Putin in Sochi. So I'm just wondering, will the Prime Minister be taking this up with the African leaders when he meets with them next week in Tunisia? And just to finally mention, apparently, outside the Russian embassy in Addis Ababa, there are huge queues of Ethiopians who want to join the Russian military forces. So again, this indicates that there is a considerable amount of support for Russia on the continent. Thank you.
Prime Minister Kishida's view is that the emerging, challenges in terms of food securities, food prices, and energy security issues were brought by Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I expect, that he'll make that point. And this is something he has been trying to kind of persuade so far with Asian leaders, including Indian Prime Minister Modi or ASEAN leaders. As I mentioned, there are different viewpoints based on history, historical relationship, and commercial ties, as you are aware. Some African countries import so much, for example, Russian wheat, right? And so there could be some countries in the region, that may want to preserve, that relationship. But PM Kishida has been making the case that, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not European issue. This, for example, our Asian security issues are inseparable from European security landscape. So we are all connected. So this logic applies to Africa or Southeast Asia or other regions in the world. If you allow unilateral change of status quo by one party violating international law, that would undermine the foundation of international society. So this is the case that PM Kishida has been making, And I'm sure that these kind of views would be expressed. And this requires continuous diplomatic engagement and efforts. So this is something. If he goes to UN General Assembly next month, these are kind of issues again we'll be taking up, and we wish to collaborate with African countries for UN reform, including UN Security Council reform, because in many cases the vetoes from Russia or China are basically kind of paralyzing the functions of Security Council. Thank you.
Hi, Tanaka Koichiro from Keio University, also the honorary member of FCCJ. My question is again with TICAD. First of all, I would like to wish Prime Minister Kishida for success in TICAD 8 in Tunisia. TICAD, as I understand, has been facing challenges from China in the African continent in recent years. But now we see that Russia, as just Tom mentioned, is also trying to enter this kind of a game and competition with the others. Now, what will be the success, key to the success of TICAD 8, given the circumstances that there's a rising tension not only in the African continent, but also amongst the world leaders that are actually trying to hold a better, establish a better relationship with the African countries? Thank you.
We are proposing the idea of kind of principles for development finance in the context of G7 and other international fora. And these development finance needs to be based on principles such as transparency or openness and sustainable finance. And as we see in the case of for example, Sri Lanka's situation, if there could be projects which go against those principles, those projects may not be viable, and those recipient governments or countries would suffer at the end of the day. So this is something we see, and so we are coming up with the case that how we could promote sustainable development in the long term, and this requires quality infrastructure and openness and transparency of those, for example, loan agreements would be very important, and some of those countries, go to Paris Club, but when you see some of the third-party loan agreements are not made public, the countries, get into trouble in recovering, from the so-called, debt, trap. So we are making the case, based on our own, experiences and the good practices of sustainable development, and we are also worried about some of kind of dissemination of false information, sometimes disinformation, and especially after Russian invasion of Ukraine, and when we follow, some of the media landscape, there are kind of dissemination by the third party in terms of misguided messages, and so we are also aware of the need to address those issues too. Thank you.
Thank you. I have last question online from Pio D'Emilia again. Sky 24. He asked about Burma. Japan has never withdrawn support from for the military regime that overthrew Myanmar democratically elected government in February 21. Japan has also withheld diplomatic and humanitarian support for the shadow national unity government. And while a few companies like Kirin pulled out of the country, Mitsubishi Corp remains an investor in the Yatagon offshore gas field, which has provided a financial lifeline for the military regime. Don't you think Japan should take a braver approach toward the military junta, starting maybe by stopping Japan's self-defense forces training Myanmar military personnel, which is still continuing? Failure to do so is tantamount, is like supporting the war crimes, according to his words. Thank you.
On the issues surrounding Myanmar, we have been deeply, concerned, about the current situation. And for example, when Prime Minister Kishida went to Cambodia, Cambodia as a I guess a chair of ASEAN in terms of engaging with Myanmar, the foreign minister was preparing for the visit to Myanmar. And we are supportive for ASEAN's efforts to address Myanmar problems. And of course, we are attentive to the human rights issues that have been ongoing in Myanmar. As you're aware, the Prime Minister Kishida appointed the human rights, the special advisor, former minister, defense minister Nakatani. So we are of the view that through engaging with the Myanmar side, we wish to kind of realize the return of Myanmar to the democracy and better human rights protection. So this is still ongoing process, and this may not be realized only by Japan. We are closely collaborating with other countries concerned, especially ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Shikata-san. This will be my last question. Actually, it's a request. I am asking on behalf of many of my colleagues in the press club and FBIJ. The Kante used to hold press briefings for journalists with MOFA press card at the Kante itself. And that was very useful for us, and it seems it stopped for some reason we don't know. So you are the best person here to tell us about the future of these invitations, if we can get it back again, and we can establish a direct line between us and the Kante and on the Japanese official issues. So do you have any good news for us on this front?
Well, I heard your message, and I guess it's probably the first time that somebody with my position came to FCCJ to give a talk. My intention is to give briefings, especially to international journalists regarding Prime Minister Kishida's priority policy issues. And I will bring back this issue to PMO, and I'm very much looking forward to kind of revitalizing our engagements. Thank you.
Thank you very much in advance. I also want to mention that I attended most of your briefings after the earthquake 2011. It was held at the Kante almost on a daily basis, and you really provide us with a very good insights about the issues. So we are happy to hear that you are going most likely to continue this. Shikata-san, we would like to offer you a 1-year honorary membership to our club. You can come anytime for a year, and you can enjoy talking to us. And we also benefit from your visit. Please come as many times as possible. Thank you very much. 1 year honorary membership.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming today, and please give a big hand again for Shikata-san. Thank you. Have a nice